Hello and welcome back to another live session here from Graph UK HQ, and we're back with another wastewater wisdom session. I'm joined once again by David. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Been a bit of a crazy start today.
Yeah.
Just managing to sit down now. I'm not sure what the time says on the computer, but slightly later than our normal 10 o'clock start time.
Yes. But it's your favourite part of the day anyway.
So it is. It's wastewater live.
It is your favourite subject as well.
But yeah, once every 3 weeks. It's just can't get enough of this. Needs to do it
We
more
can do it
often.
once a week if you want. The viewers will love it. But anyway, how was your weekend, David?
All very good, Tar. A little bit quieter this weekend, following the previous weekend of birthdays and stuff. But we've got an upcoming busy one. My nephew's going to be 7. That's a scary thought.
I mean, it's quite scary that you don't quite know.
Well, there is 4 of them, and yeah, they're all relatively similar in age. So yeah, Laurie's 6 is going to become 7. That's a scary thought. They're going to be for the next 2 months until the eldest one turns 11. They're going to be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, is it all catching up?
It is. Yeah, making me feel a bit older.
Yeah. Good. Fair enough. We talked about this a bit off camera, and it's in my head. But I was carrying on with my Football Manager save, and I nearly threw my Nintendo Switch at the wall. It was London Derby, Tottenham versus Chelsea. I think it was at home. It was at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. We went 3-1 down in the first half. So yeah, we went 2-0 down. We got back to 2-1. They scored to make it 3-1. I nearly threw my Nintendo Switch at the wall. But I won the game 4-3. We scored in the 87th minute. And I was doing my best not to charge around the house like a lunatic.
I thought you saved that for like England football games where we get through knockout stages.
Oh, no, I was going absolutely mental because I want to win the league again. But then also Tottenham won in real life against Chelsea on the weekend 2-0. And Oliver Skipp scored an absolute worldie. And I was around my girlfriend's house and I couldn't scream as I normally would do. But my actual family members actually went to the game, which I was really gutted about because they didn't tell me.
Did they?
No, my dad's cousin went, and I only saw it when I was on their Instagram. I was like, "How do you swindle them tickets?" I was like, "Why do you not invite me?"
Yeah, quite.
But anyway, we'll stop digressing as usual and go into today's subject of wastewater wisdom, and this is quite a biggie. We haven't talked about this for a while. I wouldn't say we've been putting it off, but we're finding the right time to talk about it. Because as we learn more about the subject, it means we can then talk more about it, which is, of course, nutrient neutrality. So it's quite a big bit of legislation that's currently affecting sewage treatment plants and the market in today's kind of climate, I'd say. But we've got the expert. We've got the resident expert on all things wastewater treatment.
The resident expert, not the expert.
You're the expert. You are Mr. Wastewater, David. That's what I hope people don't call you. But anyway, what is nutrient?
Many other things, but not that.
Yeah, it's like Mr. Wastewater is not quite. It doesn't really hit the bells, does it? But anyway, David, what is nutrient neutrality for those that don't know?
So the general principle is the idea behind nutrient neutrality is to reduce the runoff of domestic foul water. You could also incorporate other types of water, but mainly the focus is on foul water from developments, whether it's be new, old, ones that are potentially just being converted, basically to help protect the environment. So if you are increasing the nutrient runoff, so the amount of flow, the type of flow, whether it's more concentrated, type of foul water from a development, you need to find some way to firstly reduce that. That can be on site, or you could look at ways to offset it using other means away from the site. The general approach, of course, is to reduce first and then offset that later. And primarily here at Graph, of course, we are very much in favour of, and the systems that we offer is the reducing element to it. So by incorporating an on-site wastewater treatment works, we can significantly reduce the nutrient runoff from the site through the biological process that a wastewater treatment plant offers. A wastewater treatment system will only get you so far, though. It's a very good controlling layer we can implement and basically give customers an idea of how much treatment efficiency, performance, reduction levels the treatment plant will offer, and the remaining amounts will need to be usually offset in some way. This could be offset away from this particular development. So you could look at purchasing land and implementing some forestry land for growth of other living animals and things like that, or you could look to upgrade various other systems that are currently discharging into the same water network. So if you've got if you're discharging into quite a large river, for example, that has many other systems connecting into it, if you've currently got systems connected into it which aren't meeting the legislation, so like some people may still be using a septic tank to discharge into a river, of course, you basically can support that development in upgrading their septic tank to a treatment plant, therefore running the nutrient runoff, for example, and of course you then gain credits against your own system. So yeah, offsetting is looked at as the thereafter to try and make up the difference, try and make your own developments nutrient neutral. So that's kind of generally how it works. The reason why we generally need to look at nutrient neutrality is, of course, the impacts on the environment. So we do mention this quite a bit on our rainwater harvesting topic, but wastewater treatment is right up there alongside it. And really, it's protecting the environment, the ecosystems. So with the runoff of the nutrients from the foul water, so we've got all sorts of different compounds within the water. And mainly we talk about nutrient neutrality is the nitrogen compounds and the phosphates. These have a very positive impact in terms of certain living plants in and around rivers. And by the promotion or growth of these plants, it very much inhibits the other living organisms and living animals in and around that area as well. Of course, you've got the aquatic life as well. So the idea, of course, is to basically not have a further impact in terms of new developments going in and reduce where we can. We do need to remember, of course, that humans have been on this planet for quite some time now. We have been using and discharging foul water into rivers for a silly amount of time in history. And of course, if you think about farming and agriculture as well, when we talk about the fertilizers and sprays they use in the crops to promote their growth, that of course will steadily run down into a stream as well. So that has a significant impact as well. So we're a bit more mindful now of the impacts that we are potentially having. Certainly in the last 20 to 25 years, there's been a huge increase in terms of the technology, in terms of foul water treatment. So really it's coming to light now that's the impacts that humans are with an ever-growing population, certainly on the environments. We need to try and do what we can to protect it for the future generations to come.
And when we say nutrients, we're very much talking about stuff that's in the wastewater, so phosphates, nitrates that are causing algal blooms in watercourses. This is how it's all come about.
Yes, so yeah, it's the promotion of particular plants like algal blooms, which live in and around waters that will basically inhibits the life of the living things. So they'll basically steal the oxygen from the water, meaning that fish won't survive, and then other plants, anything in and around that will struggle to use that water. And of course, if we're discharging foul water, which has got all sorts of microorganisms and bad bacteria and stuff in it, into these watercourses, it's going to have a very detrimental effect in terms of not only potentially promoting the phosphorus and nitrate levels, but of course with those microorganisms basically damaging the other living things within the water as well. So there's always, the more you look into it, there's more and more that you uncover in terms of how detrimental it can be to the environment.
Because as you can imagine, you've kind of talked about it there with farmers using sprays that are usually heavy in nitrogen to help with the promotion of crops. Is if you look at it as the nitrogen kind of runs off, say from the rain, runs off into the streams and into watercourses nearby, nitrogen is going to basically have the same impact on aquatic plants as it's going to be on crops. It's the fact that it's going to boost their growth, and in order for them to grow, they need oxygen. And what they're going to do is take oxygen from the water and obviously starves living organisms of oxygen in it, which has promoted their growth and is destroying ecosystems. And this all started in around the south of England, correct?
It was firstly noticed in Europe, and then from the study that was in Europe, it was then brought up by Natural England in the southwestern side of the country, and it's now slowly growing from there. So it's kind of gone very much now into Wales, and it's slowly expanding across the Midlands and potentially further north. So
as they start to see what's actually happened,
the impact it's having,
because they're identifying, oh, this is a problem, but now they're thinking, this is what's caused it.
So they originally discovered it through the growth of algal blooms, as you said, and by noticing a prolific growth of a particular organism, they thought, hang on a minute, what's happening here? They've done a study into why it's been happening, and they've deduced that it is the fertilizers and the nutrient runoff from developments which are going into rivers, promoting the growth of this particular plant, and then that's basically damaging the environment. So by any new development which is in a local area, a protected area, we'll need to really look at some way to enforce a nutrient neutral development. So they will get approval to continue with their development and build and get it completed. So it is a kind of a little bit of a pushback in terms of the development of new buildings and technologies, whether it's be on existing farmland or there might be some new urban developments. It really is quite a big pushback in terms of the growing business environments, certainly down in the affected areas.
Because when we've talked about, obviously, you say there is pretty much two stages. There's the reduction and the offsetting. With reduction, it's very much using bolt-ons like phosphate and nitrate removal packages with our treatment plants is the one step. But when it comes to offsetting, what are the usual ways that a development may go about that?
So I did briefly touch on that. It's generally it will be off-site, but it will be kind of linked into the same water discharge network. So would this be a large river, but like the Tame, for example. But the idea, of course, is that any water that's been discharged into that river, you can look at finding out in the local area other systems that are discharging into that water network and improve their efficiency. So they could already have a treatment plant in place, but you could look at incorporating a way of reducing the nutrient runoff through, as you said, potentially specific treatment modules to reduce the phosphorus and nitrogen. It could be that they have septic tanks, as I said, and by upgrading from a septic tank to a treatment plant, we're effectively reducing the nutrient runoff by a minimum of 50% through any wastewater treatment system, whether it be one of our own or whether it be a competitive plant. But of course, you can go quite a bit further with SBR technology, just to the level of control we get within the treatment plant and the large batch reactor space we have for the aeration process. Basically, with the biological process, the bacteria living it, they will absorb the phosphorus into themselves if they've got a very good working environment. So having a very good oxygen level that you'll get from a large anaerobic system will help the bacteria absorb that phosphorus. And of course, if they absorb the phosphorus, there's less in the discharge. And likewise, because with SBRs, we can change the oxygen level within the treatment plant for a small amount. We can basically allow for the breakdown of the nitrogen compounds, so the nitrates and nitrates, to form nitrogen gas. Of course, that's then emitted into the atmosphere, and that again, of course, is no longer in the water network. But I'm going quite into depth now. You've got me going, so well done. But yeah, the idea, of course, with the wastewater treatments, we have the accessibility to really break down these compounds within the treatment plant on site, and then we can then look to the off-site means of upgrading existing systems or potentially looking at installing tertiary treatments. So you could look at like a wetlands rebed. You could look at building forests in local environments to offset for the compounds that you would otherwise be putting into the water, of course.
Perfect. I believe we've gone into quite a bit of detail about nutrient neutrality and covered it very well. So thank you for that. I knew you were going to get going, but about 10 minutes you've spoken about it. So it's not a record, but we knew we'd get you with that one. But anyway, now it's time for the in the news section, my favorite section, and fast becoming David's favorite section of today's session. So we've got a couple of I haven't got quite dreary ones, I have to say. We've taken a turn. There is one story that is absolutely gold. But first, we're going to be speaking about Water UK and how they're urging the public in a new campaign to bin wipes instead of flushing them down the toilet. So as we know, wipes cause 70% of all drain blockages in the UK, which help to cause what is called fatbergs, which are...
Sounds tasty.
I assume it's something to do with icebergs. That's where everything goes. So instead of a mass populace of ice, it's a mass populace of fat and wipes. It's disgusting, we know. However, because wipes unlike toilet paper, doesn't kind of break down. It basically stays as it is. As it gets flushed down the pipework, it can easily get caught up in it and cause blockages and stuff like that. And it's a big problem, as we mentioned over. Oh, it kind of says there's about 300,000 sewer blockages a year, costing the UK £100 million. And considering, if you go quote unquote, that 75% is done from these fatbergs used from wipes. If you do the simple math, it's about £75 million it costs the UK.
Nice.
In wet wipes. So, yeah, bin them, don't flush them. And this is the case for treatment plants and septic tanks as well, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, in terms of the working operation from any wastewater treatment system, they will have a detrimental effect in terms of whether you have media in the tank, electronic pumps, airlifters, diffusers. Really is a very bad thing to get wipes into a wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah, and then even in the discharging part as well, it could.
Oh, very much so.
Field, it could.
Yeah, if you discharge into ground like a drainage field, that's that could be a costly repair for the.
Yeah, and also if you've got say if you're going into a watercourse and it blocks the pipework there, that means all that sewage is going to back up into your tank and overflow.
Yeah. So this is, of course, this article that kind of Cam's brought to our attention, of course, is for the on-site, the main stuff, which
you
change.
Drainage.
Where, of course, if you are a private developer and you have this particular problem, it's very much going to be the onus on you to get it sorted out.
Yeah.
So that could be quite a costly figure. So really good highlights to try and look after your wastewater pipes as much as you can.
Exactly, because it's going to cost us a lot of money. But anyway, next news story, not as scary and trying to warn people off, is nearly 10,000 people oppose a plan that would pump treated sewage into the Thames. So this is as a result of kind of the drought that we saw last year. Obviously, the Thames level dropped quite considerably. But there's a large sewage treatment plant in Mogden, or it's called the Mogden Sewage Treatment Plant, and I believe it helps with the treating of waste of London. It's near Teddington, I believe it's called. But it means that a lot of waste could be pumped directly into the Thames. Obviously, this is treated effluent, and it's got over 10,000 signatures have signed a petition in order to block it.
No, 10,000 doesn't sound very much. For quite a significant problem, in my opinion. But I suppose 10,000 is enough to get it recognised, is it?
Yes, but I think what would help is a petition set up by 1,000 strong swimming group, the Teddington Blue Tits, against the sewage water recycling scheme, has attracted almost 10,000 signatures. Obviously, because people are swimming in the river.
Nice.
Not going to comment, but the fact that 10 people are so many people are swimming in the river, I would say is a bad thing anyway, because I think a lot of people may be not understanding what actually goes in the river anyway.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it from the whole, the river Thames starts kind of about here, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's quite far. Yeah, quite far in there. Yeah.
Because we're over in Thames Valley, and you think the amount of rubbish that's going into the water from the start, from its tributaries, and they're probably even treatment plants actually discharging into the river itself.
Yeah,
especially from an early stage.
Yeah, I mean, it's perfectly within the binding rules and building regulations to discharge water from foul water treatment plants into the river. So, although we're getting quite a good treatment in terms of like the BOD, suspended solids, and ammonia from a treatment plant, the other living organisms that escape don't get treated on a standard system. So it really is for people to pay attention to, foul water disposal into rivers, even on a small scale, which a foul water treatment plant can discharge up to like 5 meters cubed into a river without a permit to discharge. But if you've got 1,000 systems, like that is still a significant volume of water. So people need to be a bit more pay attention to make them aware of what's going on.
Well, because the issue is, I believe, is the fact that this scheme would actually look to put up to between 100 and 300 million litres of water back into the Thames every day. Because obviously, as we mentioned, I think it was in the last wastewater treatment session, we were talking about how much leaks were actually happening in the UK and how much it was costing them. So I think the idea is obviously it helps to replace and bring back some water into the actual water cycle, especially for the Thames, because as we know, especially with the drought last year, there was a certain amount of the water level dropped in the UK because of it, but also because of the amount of leaks that actually happen in the UK, it helps just to keep the river topped up. So yeah, quite interesting. But I think if more people understood like the grander scheme, I think they'd actually, because obviously when you hear they're going to start pumping treated sewage, people are like, oh, they're going to pump poo in the river, but not actually understanding that if you go further down kind of the water, literally go further down the river, you'll see what's actually being discharged into it, and you wouldn't want to swim in it anyway. Yeah, that's that. Next one is, I personally think, quite a amusing story. It's certainly one we've never seen before, and it's called poop tomatoes. That's right. We're going to talk about tomatoes growing in sewage. You're already rolling your eyes at this.
This is the topic of the week because, of course, the tomato scare that's currently ongoing. Is this why you brought this up?
Well, no, this is due to there is a lack of there is a shortage of vegetables currently in the UK, but there's also some people encouraging, this is on Facebook, to pick the tomatoes that have been found growing in sewage. So I wouldn't. You're going to need a lot of washing. But what has been found is that in, I believe it's Kent, there's been sewage dumped from kind of main bodies of water into the shoreline around about there. But what it's found is that tomato seeds that have been found in human excrement have then basically seeded and grown. So I believe there might be some photos, but you can see vines of tomatoes actually growing within the sewage, as you can kind of sit here.
So this is not just someone's gone out their way to plant tomatoes in their fertilized soil. It's very much, oh my goodness, that's a whole new level.
Yeah, so there are some theories. Some are saying it may be that birds have been eating the seeds, and then obviously as they excrement, they're basically spreading them along the shoreline. But there are other theories that the seeds have been kept in obviously human excrement. They've gone from the sewage into basically these works, and yeah, they've started to seed. And some people, I wonder if some people have actually ate it. So yeah, this guy has videos. Oh yeah, he has that one. So yeah, this guy has been going through and actually eating them. I personally would have washed them first. I doubt he would have washed it in the sea where the sewage is. But yeah, very interesting, isn't it?
I probably wouldn't eat them.
How much
would roll like that? I would pretty much like boil them to oblivion.
How much would I have to pay you to eat one straight picked from that vine?
No, I probably wouldn't consider it. I quite like my health, thank you very much.
It'd be good for you, a bit of roughage, a bit of fibre. It'd certainly get those. It'd certainly build up your immune system.
It certainly would.
But anyway, I think that's quite an interesting story, and I have been saying over the past however long that we need some uplifting stories, and that is definitely one. So yeah, poop tomatoes. If you're struggling to find tomatoes at your local supermarket, feel free to go down to your local shoreline and pick some up. Anyway, interesting.
Very good.
I told you we found a nice uplifting story.
I think it's still just the way you approached it.
It's funny, but yeah, it's just interesting. And the whole how it got there is very much on people's minds. But anyway, now we finished the in the news section, which is a great shame because it is my favorite, and I'd love to know more about.
I have to wait until next week now.
Yep, we're going to be next week talking about poop broccoli. But anyway, now it's time to answer any and all questions that have come in during today's live stream. So we have had some come in. We'll have them up on the screen now. So the first one that's come in is, what is the difference between a cesspool and a septic tank?
Okay, so firstly, I'd like to say that both of these types of tank are used to collect foul water runoff from property, dwelling, any sort of developments. But they generally treat the foul water in different ways. Both are on-site solutions. With a cesspool, we're very much retaining the all of the foul water runoff, so your grey water and your black water, into a tank. And it's very much just basically built up over time. And once it becomes full, you generally have to get a tanker in to empty the cesspool out and take it down to a level where, of course, you can then receive new inflow. The important thing to remember with cesspool, certainly from an installer point of view, is you generally need to have good conditions to put the tank in the ground. With a cesspool, of course, you're very much leaving the tank empty because you're collecting that liquid waste. So if you're going into an area where you've got very high groundwater, you need to find some way to make the tank strictly sound. So when the tank is empty, it's not going to pop out the ground. So just something to bear in mind, but something that might scare a few people away from the terrible solution that is a cesspool. And a cesspool generally is sized kind of in line with how many people are feeding it and for a certain time period. So with the cesspool, as we are collecting that liquid as waste as well, the frequency that you have to get it emptied is relatively high. If we then compare that to a septic tank is kind of the next stage up. So with the septic tank, we incorporate dividing walls into the tank, and we also have an outflow. And with the septic tank, we're very much retaining the solid waste from the tank and allowing the liquid waste to discharge out. Under the current binding rules, drainage code of practice 6297, we're allowed to discharge from a septic tank into something which is called a drainage field, which is basically a network of perforated pipe, allowing for basically a small tertiary treatment of that water as it percolates through into the ground. So you generally have to have a good soil to use a septic tank, so we have this option for percolation. With septic tanks, you generally need to consider the volume that you are discharging. On a domestic level, anything up to 2 meters cubed is permitted. Anything larger than 2 meters cubed to ground for a septic tank you need to have a permanent discharge. So something that some people need to take into consideration. Of course, with a septic tank, as we're only retaining the solid waste within the tank, the frequency versus a cesspool, for example, to get the tank emptied is obviously significantly less. So that's a huge benefit. Of course, there is a slight environmental impact with the septic tank because we are discharging into the environments, but with a suitably sized drainage solution, that should be reduced quite significantly. When tanks are empty, they generally the sludge waste is taken off to like a foul water municipal treatment works. So that's something to bear in mind. That's going to cost the homeowner some money. Basically, the frequency, of course, is of how many times it needs to be empty per year is going to have a significant impact in terms of how much that cost is going to be, and in terms of the volume extracted as well. So with a cesspool, they are generally sized, as we said, in terms of how much inflow and the number of people feeding it. That is going to be a significantly more volume of waste because of retaining the liquid than a septic tank would be. So whereas a septic tank could just be 2,000-3,000 litres, so a small desludging vehicle, which is going to cost some money. When you talk about a cesspool, it could be lots and lots of cubic meters worth. So the volume, of course, for the cesspool is significantly more as well. So try and steer away from cesspools as you can. They're generally used as a last resource in terms of a foul water solution. Try and stick with, slightly off topic, wastewater treatment plants where you can, because they protect the environment the most. Then go to a septic tank, and then go to a cesspool. I mean, of course, if there is the option to connect into the mains water network, that is by far the best solution, because of course it's going to then be treated properly at a proper treatment works. But aside from that, on-site treatments, wastewater treatment plant, septic tank, then cesspool.
Perfect. That answers that one. Then the next question we've had come in is, how can you determine whether a wastewater treatment system is operating as per design?
Wow, okay. It's quite an interesting question. I think generally the first thing I should say is, as a homeowner, you should have a general understanding of how the treatment plants you have installed works, because there are lots of different treatment plants on the markets and they work in slightly different ways. So generally having that general understanding to know how the system works will generally mean that, of course, you know if something is not quite right. For example, if you were to have a lot of smells being produced from the system, this could be an indication that the tank is full of sludge. It could also mean that you've got potentially a problem with your drainage system. So there's some like key highlights in terms of knowing how treatment plant performs. So if there is something going wrong, you can identify it and then potentially get someone in to look at it. So as the homeowner, very much on the onus for them is to have an idea of how the system works, and if there should be any daily checks, for them to carry out those daily checks where they can. So just checking the system control panel if it has one, for example, and just making sure it's doing what it needs to do. Next step up from that would be to have the system serviced by a competent engineer who knows how the system works. There's lots of different knowledge in terms of the wastewater treatment industry, in terms of the different types of systems. So I would very much recommend getting a company in that knows about the system. There are quite a lot of similarities in terms of how the biology works in the treatment plants. They're all doing the same thing after all, just increasing the oxygen level in the tank. So the bacteria have a better environment to do their breakdown process better. But how we increase the oxygen level changes within different types of manufacturers' treatment plant. So very much having an understanding of how the working components work, what to look for, is very important. During a system servicing, there's quite a few things that you might want to find out from the company kind of finding out the surface. The main ones to look at, of course, would be the ammonia, the BOD, and suspended solids. Those are the key three parameters that we generally look for when we talk about the code of practice and implementing a wastewater treatment system. If you are discharging water into a protected area, you could also look at other things within the water. Certainly things like the phosphate concentration, nitrogen. You could look at BOD and like as well. Kind of, they're all like on-site tests, but you take a water sample away, you send it off to like a chemical lab to test it properly. So a bit more high-level stuff, but should that be a requirement for you because you're in a protected area where you need to protect the environments, that would be very much something for them to carry it for you on your behalf, just to make sure your system is conforming. And alongside that general test in terms of water quality, you can double check the system operation, back pressure on compressors, and like the diffusers in the tank. You can have a look at the sludge level, for example. Then you can get an indication of where the system needs to be emptied, all that sort of stuff. So there is quite a lot of in-depth stuff that a service provider can carry out in terms of maintaining and servicing a treatment plant.
Cool. And you mentioned that they're talking about having it properly having the system properly serviced and maintained. And if they're looking for someone if they have a grass system installed and they're looking for someone, it's best to get in contact because we have a network of service providers that can do that for them.
Yeah, so here at Graph, we generally have on-site training, which we invite people, where they have a day with us to learn about certainly wastewater treatment systems in general, but also how a grass treatment system works, and generally the minimum that's if we were to carry out a surface, certainly on our behalf, what the things that we would expect them to work out. So we can say, yes, the system's working fine. But yes, it's, as I said, having a company that knows of the system is really important. If you were to get in contact with us, we do have a network of service providers scattered around the UK that can support you in carrying out that service for you.
Perfect. That answers that. And then the next question we have that's come in is, what happens if a sewage treatment plant is overloaded?
Okay. I think the most important thing to say here first is that all wastewater treatment systems are designed with some sort of safety factor in place. When I say safety factor, they are designed to receive a certain amount of flow for the required size, and then they kind of have a buffer built into them. So if you were to have an additional load for a short period of time, the system should be able to support that for a set period of time. If you were to have overloading for a slightly longer period beyond what the buffer can handle, the immediate problem you would see, I suppose, is potentially smells from the system. You'd also be looking at affecting the treatment performance. So as we are basically excessively loading the system, the biology inside the treatment plants is going to be affected. And when you affect the biology, that's going to produce the smells, which is going to be a good indication that something's not quite right. But it also means that the discharged water from the treatment plants is not going to be at a standard that we want to protect the environment. So that's kind of the immediate problem you would see, drop in treatment performance. If you were to have long-term overloading, you're very much going to start having problems with things like discharge to the drainage solution. So whether this is going to ground or if it's going to a watercourse, that's going to have a very significant impact in terms of the environment thereafter the treatment plant. So long-term problems will affect the drainage solution more than what's going on inside the tank, of course. And when we start talking about things outside of the treatment plant, the watercourse and the drainage field, that's going to have quite an impact in terms of costs as well, in terms of for the homeowner to repair it. You could also get some sort of penalty fine if you're discharging into a watercourse and you're picked up saying, hang on a minute, your system's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's very much for the homeowner to ensure the system is working as it should be and they're not, they're servicing it properly, ensuring it's working as per the manufacturer's recommendations. So the idea, of course, is the whole point of implementing a wastewater treatment system is to protect the environment. If the treatment plant can't do that because it's overloaded, then there's going to be, of course, implications of that. So really, in terms of the important real note to take away from this, in the first instance, is just make sure the system is sized correctly in the first instance. So this is actually the wastewater treatment system up front as a primarily treatment facility, and then the drainage solution thereafter. So if you're going into a watercourse, then that's, of course, it's very much dictated by the code of practice in terms of how much you can discharge. You'll generally need a permit for discharge if it's going above 5 meters cubed per day. But if you're going to ground, of course, just making sure that you test the soil porosity correctly, the percolation rate, to ensure that the water is going to disperse into the ground at a controlled rate. So it's going to be treated correctly.
Perfect. That answers that one. Have we had any more questions come in? Can't see on the screen they had. No, I guess that's that answers. No. Anyway, David, thank you for your time today. It was slightly a longer one. We've reached nearly 37 minutes.
Good.
I know I shouldn't have you talking about nutrient neutrality. You knew you were going to go off.
Well, yeah, well, you start it.
I know, I was always talking about football. I could talk about football manager. Bloody. But anyway, thank you, David, for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
You've been wonderful, as always. And thank you, one and all, for taking your time out of the day to come watch today's session. So next week you won't be in the hot seat. We'll have Stormwater School.
Yep, Stormwater.
We'll be having Lisa in the hot seat, the fabulous Lisa, to talk about all things stormwater management. And I'll be here as well, as always. Hopefully this time not talking about football manager, but we will see. But anyway, have a wonderful week, everyone. Thank you for today. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you on the next one.